just want to share a lesson I learned from being on a National Geographic survival show. Yes, I was on one of those. This is me on the show. I was one of the 4 people who was cast on this particular episode about the survival brain, which is hilarious because at this point I had no idea that I actually had a lot of trauma, and that being a survivor was, there was many layers to being a survivor. But they got me on the show because they had heard about me as a storyteller in New York and all that stuff. And then someone I had worked with at some point told them about me, and I lived in my trunk and was a whitewater raft guide, doing stuff like this, backpacking guide, all that stuff. This is in Taos, New Mexico, where I guided for 4 seasons. Before I get into that story, I am in Greece right now visiting my family. My sister's husband is Greek. And if you want to see more content about that, go to my Patreon, which is linked in the caption, because I do more personal stories there. And I've got a couple of lives coming up with amazing people. One of the lawyers that took down Larry Nassar and one of the author of Uncultured, best-selling book. And you're guaranteed to see my work if you go over there. Whereas here, you are, if the algorithm doesn't like me anymore, you won't ever see me again. There's a free tier on that Patreon for people who just want to keep up with me. Anyway, so when I was on that show, it was just one episode. It was called Brain Games or something. I don't know. This is a while ago. They flew me out to Colorado and they put me through a bunch of tests that were trying to measure my brain. I hope y'all can hear me. It's really windy here. So for instance, they had this cable car that they threw over the side of a mountain with me in it. And then, basically free fall. And it's not a cable car. I don't even know how to describe it. I don't know what it is. But it was scary. I mean, I was more excited than scared, but they basically just dropped me off a cliff. And I was the first to go, so I didn't even know what was going to happen. Anyway, what they did is, so on the first test, as they threw me off that, there was 4 of us. There was me, the professional survivor of the wilderness. There was a fireman, search and rescue, one of the most misogynistic people I've ever met in my life, who also was a comedian. So, it just covered the whole spectrum. One of them was a former military, and he was actually way cooler than the fireman. And then there was a yoga instructor. She was cool. I'm not sure how she ended up on that show, but anyway, they, wanted to see who was who could survive. Not it wasn't a competition at all. There's no drama. It was literally about the brain and measuring the brain. They wanted to understand the brain. And this particular show was about survival instinct. So they picked a bunch of people who have survived a lot of stuff, and who are maybe professional survivors or, work in survival as a job like I had as a raft guide, guide, backpacking guide and all that stuff. And if you haven't seen my last story, I talk more about that from a couple days ago where someone died right in front of us here. And I go into a little bit of some of my delayed trauma around working in survival, how a lot of us don't really process it until much later. Anyway, I know I wish I could do that game now. Sorry, it's not a game, that show. I wish I could do that show now because I would have so much more to say. Of course, the men thought that they were going to survive more than us, because men think they're tougher than us, and men rely on brute strength and coercion and aggression and violence and all that stuff to get what they want. Whereas women have been taught to use emotional intelligence, follow our intuition, sew the social fabric of society, and we know how important relationships are. So I'm going to get back to that in a second. But just for example, the first test was they threw us over this cliff thingy. They also flew us over the cliff in one of those cables, like the Batman stuff. I don't even care. I don't even want to explain it, but it was kind of it was scary, but also I wasn't that scared because as a climber and stuff like that, I understand this was nothing compared to the climbs I'd been on. But what they wanted to do is see how my brain would react when it was jacked up on adrenaline. So as soon as I got off the ride, then I had to go and do a puzzle. I don't think I did very good on the puzzle. It wasn't because of my adrenaline levels. I just thought the puzzle was really dumb and weird. So I probably would have done even worse had I not been jacked up on adrenaline. But anyway, I forget what some of the other ones were. But I remember one of the tests of survival was what they took us through some woods. And now because I am a woman, and was raised to see danger literally everywhere, or just be aware of it, that it could be everywhere. When we were walking through the woods, I had worked for Outward Bound and was like a guide, so I pay attention to where I'm going, and I have more of a storyteller mind rather than like a math mind, or I don't even know what you call it. But whenever I remember where I'm going based on me remembering my thought patterns when I'm walking. So I knew exactly where I was all the time, because I was like, oh, look at that tree, and I have a crazy thought about the tree, or it reminds me of something else, and so I'm gonna clock that tree in my brain because of the story that I associate with that tree, or because of a feeling I have because of that tree, or because of a memory that it brings up. And so I didn't know that they were going to actually test us to see if we could find our way back. I was just walking through the woods. When we got to the point, after we walked through the woods, where they were describing to us what the next challenge was, they were like, you're going to have to find your way back. And I remember thinking, well, that's easy. I was paying attention. But I also wasn't too cocky. I thought, well, maybe I wasn't paying attention. And they said that they were going to split us up into 2 teams. And wouldn't you know, the firefighter man was like, well, you got to I guess we should do boy, girl to make it fair. Now, this is all on camera. And I was like, interesting. What do you mean by that? Because I knew exactly what he meant. What he meant was you can't put 2 guys on the same team, because they would definitely dominate us. Because this was the only activity that we did that was based on being paired up, where everything else was just kind of like on your own and then measuring your brain. And he even said it. He was like, well, 2 guys versus 2 girls. And I was like, don't you worry about us. Anyway, to make it fair, they put me with the military dude, and then the yoga woman with the firemen. Guess who found their way out? I mean, I don't know how I know that it was easy. I led us out of that thing. I second guessed myself a lot, because I just assumed the military man must have been paying attention and knew more than me. And the dude was pretty nice, actually. He was never like making me defer to him or anything, but I was pretty confident. I was like, oh, that thing, I remember that. I remember seeing that thing and being like, why is that here? So I was like, we got to go straight because of this. Like, even when he led us astray, I was like, I don't think so. Like, I knew exactly what we were doing during that whole thing. I nailed that competition. And firefighter dude didn't know where he was. Pretty sure they only made it because of her. I just remember, and what I remember being so pissed about is that like nobody challenged him on his like, to be fair. And then we usually after each activity would debrief things, like they would interview each of us. And I remember wanting to talk about that so bad, about how, this idea that women don't know where we're going and stuff like that. Like first of all, we don't have the pride that's going to keep us from asking for directions from like men do. But also just because we haven't been leaders doesn't mean we're not great leaders. It's because we've been kept from leading. It's because men neg us all the time into thinking that we wouldn't be great leaders. But since I had been a leader in the outdoors for a long time, I was very confident in my leadership skills. And I had also learned from working with so many men, do not trust their leadership skills, because they're full of hubris and overconfidence, and they're reckless, and they get people unalived all the time. As I've talked about in my last story yesterday, of a man who got a woman drowned right in front of me because of him. So I had no reason to trust fireman or military man or any man in the wilderness, because I almost always knew more than men. Not always. There's some men that knew. I'm humble enough to know when I'm wrong. But come on. And I didn't get an opportunity to talk about how like sexist this dude was, how insulting it was, the way he talked about us on camera. Anyway, the producers of that show were amazing. They actually were really great. That was the only time where I was like, what? In terms of just the way it was done. But the one I really want to talk about is one of the challenges was a social survival situation. And they took all of us to like a brewery somewhere in like Colorado Springs or something. And apparently everybody there was like extras or something, and they were all in on it. And we had to convince several people to give us things. Like one person, we had to convince them to give us their jacket. One person, we had to ask them to give us something else. Like we had to collect things from people. And I don't think the people knew that that's what we were doing. They knew they were going to be on TV. They knew like that it was something, but they didn't really understand what was happening. So it wasn't like knew that we were going to ask them for something. They're trying to make it as realistic as possible. But here's the thing. This is the thing that really annoyed me. They only gave us 5 minutes or something to try to get all these things from everybody. Now, me having moved so many times in my life, having lived in other countries, having traveled alone, having slept on couches, on couch surfing for months around South America, worked on a strawberry farm in Argentina, taught English in Chile, lived in my truck for 5 years, moved to New York City without knowing anybody, moved to literally moved all the time, learned how to make friends, how to build community, how to gain the trust of people, and learn how to trust myself and other people. If there's one thing I am good at, it is talking to people. Traveling alone by myself for so long, especially on on a string or on a budget of eating bread and cheese every day, sleeping on floors, just literally being at the mercy of the world, kind of with all of my privilege and passport privilege and white privilege and able-bodied and all of those things. With all that stuff, I still was kind of in a lot of situations that was pretty crazy, and it was really vulnerable, and I was also super reckless. If you know my story, super reckless. But doing all that traveling and all of these jobs in the wilderness where I'm in charge of people's safety and I have to trust my gut, it's like I went to the intuition gym on a regular basis. And so if there's anything I learned to do, it is learn how to kind of judge a situation and learn how to connect with people easily, how to meet people and talk to people. So much so that everybody wants to talk to me all the time. And I don't know if it's because of my energy. I don't know if it's because I have a friendly face or because I'm Southern and I smile at everybody. I don't know what it is. I talk to everyone and I can talk easily to everyone. And I love that. I think a lot of that is just from traveling so much and working in so many crazy jobs and just having to meet people. So there's one thing that I thought I would nail. It was this experiment, right? But guess who failed this experiment? I did the worst. But the reason why is why I realized, that's why men should not be writing this show. Men should not be leading anything because they don't understand what community building is really like. They don't understand because here's what happened. They gave us 5 minutes. Now, what did I do? I played the slow game. I had talked with people because I'm not just going to walk up to someone and be like, hey, give me your jacket. So instead, I started talking to people because in my mind, real survival is based on building trust, relationships. Why would I ask someone for something if they had no reason to give me anything? You know what I mean? I literally had to go around and ask people for things. So guess who only got 2 out of the 5 things? But I only had 5 minutes. Whereas the other dudes, strong-arm people, they'd be like, hey, give me your jacket. You know what I mean? They basically aggressively went around and they won. They got things in no time. And then one of the producers was like, what were you doing? This is your thing. What were you doing wasting time talking to people? And I'm like, dude, this is what I would do in a normal situation. I would talk to people and get to know them and ask them questions and talk about myself in return. And it's a ping pong. I was like, okay, maybe I didn't strong arm everyone into giving me things, but you know what I did do? I got to know a lot of people in that room. And I promise you, those people in that room knew me and probably trusted me more than any of those dudes. And so I asked the guy who was in charge, the sciencey guy who had studied all this stuff for a living. I was like, hey, let me ask you something. Do you think, given what you saw, because they also interviewed this guy for this part, given what you saw, even though I didn't win and I came in last, if I had been given, 30 minutes, or if this was a real life situation where we were actually in a survival one, who do you really think would have survived? The guys who went and strong-armed everybody, or the person who was getting to know everyone in that room and building community with them? He's like, yeah, I never really thought about that. He said something like that. He's like, that's an interesting, and I was like, time. I'm sorry, if we were really in a survival situation and it was one aggressive man and a whole community, that community would have kicked that dude out. I would have been embraced by that community because I took the time and the care to be thoughtful and build and was having conversations. Anyway, that whole experiment, I was like, how do these people not understand that the social part of surviving It's critical on relationship building. Anyway, do y'all get my point? That was the first time I realized that men have no idea what they're doing. Okay, I'm sorry. That's not the first time I realized that. That was the first time I realized that even experts on things, if they're men, especially if they're white men, they don't know what they're talking about. Unless they are from a marginalized community, if they're just like cishet, able-bodied, rich white men, they don't know. They don't know anything. Like, they may be smart, but they don't understand most things because they don't have to. And so they're writing the rules, they're writing the shows, they're writing the game, they're writing everything. But they don't even know what they're talking about unless they've read a lot of books written by people who don't look like them and don't have the lived experiences of them. Like, they can learn this stuff. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm really on a survival man kick right now because I'm still pretty upset about what happened the other day. The incident, as we're talking about it, my nieces refer to it as the incident because they know to not mention at dinner or out in public, that man drowned at the beach the other day right in front of us, like, or the dead body floating in the water. Like, they're just, anytime we talk about it, we're like, oh, you know, today they're like, you know where the incident happened? Whatever, I'm enjoying my time here and with my family. But y'all know I've talked about this whole thing a lot, about men and survival and their death wish and their terrible leadership skills and all these other things. So it reminded me today of that experiment on a show literally about survival and how men would never survive. If they didn't have the emotional intelligence, if they didn't know how to build community, if they didn't know how to trust their intuition, which they are taught under patriarchy to not trust, and logic, right? If they don't learn from women how to take care of themselves, they ain't taking care of anybody, not surviving. Like, they may not die, but they're gonna wish they were dead, because to survive in this world, it requires emotional intelligence, intuition, courage, community building, and all kinds of other things. It is not strong-arming your way through life and thinking that you're way smarter and stronger than you actually are. Those things get you killed. Anyway, let me know if you enjoyed this little story. I can talk more about this. I mean, I will. I'll probably talk about this a lot because I can't stop thinking about it. Anyway, lovely view, right? Thanks for watching. Please join my Patreon so you can see me and my stuff and support my work. And again, even if you can't afford a tier, at least over there, you will get notified when I post things, instead of just hoping that the YouTube gods or whatever send my stuff your way, because right now they're not doing that. My views are down, my subs are like tanking, everything's like not doing great, but over there you will be able to see my stuff. So thanks for your support. I hope you're having a good day. Et voila. This is the comment song, the comment song, the comment song. This is the comment song. Write a story. This is the comment song, the place where you can tell me stuff. This is the comment song. So, just give you some time to finish your comment, because I don't have a plan. I'm just singing. I don't have my instruments. Anyway, comment song's about to end soon. You better tap. The comment song's about to end soon. Wrap it up. This is the comment song, the comment song, the comment song. This is the comment song, and it's about to end. Wrap it up. 3, 2, 1. Et voila. Thanks.